Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and today we have a very special video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, and it's one that's been very heavily requested from me for the past few months, but I've only recently been able to take the time to properly research, make sure that I take my own kind of journey into account and all that good stuff so that I can bring future pulls for to you guys, which I'm actually taking a slightly different approach to this time around. So hopefully you guys will get some good information from that, and we're going to be covering everything that should come up throughout the rest of 2021 for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. So if you want to know more about pretty much every character that's going to be coming up throughout the next 6 months or so, then of course, as always, stay tuned and keep on watching. Now before you get started, obviously don't forget to check out all of my social media links in the description box below. This is your last week's chance to get involved with the Alexander painting giveaway. You know, this painting was made by me, as you can see by my little signature in the corner. And if you would like a chance of winning this, then definitely click the link in the description box below. You have until Friday to enter that. And obviously if you're watching this further down the line when people are planning for future months content, then hopefully I'll be able to find time to make other paintings like this one to give away, because the reception for it has been absolutely phenomenal. So thank you very much for doing that. Over on Patreon, I do always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and today that person is going to be Multiracial Lion, who not only has been a long time supporter of mine, but actually helped me out with some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. So a massive thank you goes out to you, as well as to some of the other content creators out there, particularly Ketsalma and Inkwelder, who I speak to quite frequently when it comes to upcoming content, and I actually get a lot of information from you guys regarding anything that I'm planning on pulling for. So a big shout out goes out to you guys as well. And with regards to Patreon, of course, if you would like to be involved with Would You Pull portions of my Should You Pull videos, things like that, as well as actually seeing what other people's comments are, because I can only put so many comments out in any given video, but honestly a lot of people say within my Patreon that one of the things they get out of it most is seeing all the comments for any particular banner as it comes live. So definitely, if you wanted to get more out of that, you might want to consider checking the description box below and becoming a patron yourself, because we get loads of other benefits as well. As well as that, before we get started, a couple of disclaimers here. Now, obviously, this is going to be a long haul of a video. It's going to cover all the banners that come up between now and what I presume to be December of this year. However, there are going to be spanners in the works. This is going to be based entirely off of Japan's kind of timeline. There will be things that change. Global First banners. I'm not including the Mayfair banners, for example, because at the time of filming this video, I don't know what they are. So honestly, there is going to be wiggle room for change. Not only that, but this is going to be my personal journey and how I plan on pulling a joint throughout these 6 months, though I will give recommendations on how I feel other people may want to consider things differently to me, because this is going to be based entirely on what I already have, how much resources I have, things like that, places where I will want to prioritize certain characters over others. Your journey may look completely differently to mine. There are very few bad characters nowadays. In fact, there are next to none. So there are characters that I will say, oh, I think I might skip this character, and you'll be like, what? No, I can't believe you'd skip this character. But my planning for this time around has been done very differently, and I've planned for every event, planning with the teams that I want to take to each individual event. And I've made priority lists based on whether I absolutely have to have this unit because I'm going to use them to clear multiple Lufenias, multiple events. Higher priority where I'm like, yeah, I will use them at least within their synergy, and I'll probably use them elsewhere a lot as well. Medium priority where I'm like, I'd like to have the character, but I don't feel that I would use them all that much, even if I think they're really good. And low priority, which are characters which I feel that I can skip safely and not really have to worry about them. So now that we've gotten all of that stuff out of the way, and as I've said, do take this all with a pinch of salt, because things will change and your opinions may be may come out differently to mine. And with that, let's just get stuck in. Okay, so now we're here with Ultima's banner list here, so I'm going to go through this in batches, and I'm going to do it in the order in which bursts are released. So at the moment, we're going to just about to enter Garland's kind of age of his burst, and therefore the batch of banners that comes with him. So I'm going to start with that. Now you'll also have to forgive me if my eyes kind of wander around a little bit when it comes to doing this video, because I have notes on whether I'm planning on pulling a character what teams I'm planning on using on a Lufenia, tips on like looking at the Lufenia, the mission itself, and seeing what gets used in what. I have information all over various screens, so forgive me if my eyes wander a little bit. Now, you'll know that I've just released my Should You Pull video for Garland. Now, Garland is a character that I personally will be using all of my resources to acquire. I don't have his LD currently, so therefore I'll be using gems or burst tokens, whatever it takes to get a full-blown Garland, because I think that he is usable not only throughout the entirety of his synergy, which includes a Dimensions End Transcendence, and therefore it's going to make your life a lot easier getting that. He is just an exceptional damage dealer as well, and if you get his burst now, getting his burst now means not having to get it later, and you like coming out with a burst plus character, which we'll come to later in the video, that you don't actually have to pull for. So if you plan for it now, you can save yourself having to pull later, and doing so with a character that's going to last for a significant amount of time, even the first time around, let alone the second. So for that reason, Garland is of the highest priority for me. Seven, on the other hand, is a low priority character. Like, I don't plan on using her very much. I already have access to Sarah, who is very much similar to her in that she augments damage quite significantly for various fights, and honestly, I was struggling to fit Sarah into certain team compositions because while researching various Lufenia clears, etc., I didn't come across Sarah because our version of Sarah is different to that of JP's. But when it comes to his event, I will probably be using Garland, Aranea, and Ramza, but honestly, any kind of delay team is going to work really well for you here. You'll just blitz it that way. Now, when it comes to Desh and Yang, Desh is a low priority character for me at this point. He doesn't get a huge amount out of his LD boards. He is still fairly good. He's an HP regenning offensive support character, very similar to Raijin back in the day, but having a much wider array of field effects, and he's quicker than Raijin as well. But ultimately, I don't feel that I absolutely have to have Desh in any way. Yang, on the other hand, is an interesting one. For me, personally, I consider him a mid-priority character. I would like to ticket Yang because I do think he's very good, but he is a considerably higher priority character for you if you're planning on using characters like Terra, Tidus, or Aranea a lot, because any character that takes a significant number of turns benefits from Yang a great deal. I would like to ticket Yang myself, even though I don't plan on using Terra all that much, because I already have Terra's LD, having access to Garland, Terra, and Yang can trivialize a fair number of fights by itself. That and Desh's Lost Chapter is actually quite difficult, so if I can have access to Yang for that, then it's going to make my life a lot easier in general. And there are fights going forward where you can literally just take Yang, Terra with just her LD, Garland with Burst Phase, and then you just go nuts. Because what Yang does is he does an AoE follow-up attack after any action taken, but only for the next 2 of his turns. So you need to pair him with a character that takes a lot of turns consecutively in order for you to get the most out of him. Now, Ignis is a weird one, because Ignis hasn't actually been announced for the global version yet, but I assume he's going to come out. Ignis, for me, at this point in time, is a low priority character because of the fact that I don't feel I need him right now. He comes back on a later banner that I would, however, like to pick him up on. And this is because his call abilities are actually very strong. By and large, Ignis is actually fairly good anyway. He gets transformed with his LD into having a fire enchant and imperil effect, and he grants even more kind of party offensive auras than he already did. But if you don't necessarily have to have him right now. Like, he will come into his own more in the Burst Plus era, where having a call with Enchant Imperil and weakness damage up as well will make a difference to him in order to help you just hit harder all round. But if you're going for him, he has debuff evasion as well, which is never something you should sniff at. So if you don't have access to Aerith, or you don't plan on getting other characters with debuff evasion like Aphmau later on, then Ignis is somebody you might want to pick up at some point. Faris is a character that I consider a high priority character. Not highest, but a high priority character. And this is based almost entirely on the fact that her call abilities are absolutely revolting. She gets reworked so that her debuffs are framed and significantly stronger. So she's putting 70% framed attack and defense down on the enemies, and the LD debuff as well, which makes it so that their bravery instantly gets set to 0 after they've acted, and they become weak to a plethora of other elements as well, like wind, thunder, and water, because they were the elements that Faris attacks for. Faris is actually very good in DE Transcendence too as well, because one of the crucibles asks for elemental weakness damage, which she capitalizes on, and the other asks, and the center one asks for 5 debuffs plus on the enemy, which she absolutely ruins. But that being said, Faris is a character that you may not use in your main party a huge amount as time goes on, like the likes of Garland, etc. But I think any character whose call ability can just be brought out at any time is somebody worth looking at the very least. And certainly when debuffs get expanded to having 8 slots rather than 6, Faris becomes even more valuable, and especially if you like to use Sarah a lot, having debuffs active at all times for you to have access to trigger her abilities, that's going to be even better for you then as well. So now we come to Golbez's kind of batch here. Now Golbez's batch comes along with Divine Alexander as well as High Armor Plus. So High Armor Plus is what you've realistically been saving your Lufenia tokens for, because what High Armor Plus does is it expands High Armor significantly, and it also reworks a lot of the keystone, so then the encouragement keystone becomes a much bigger deal than it was originally, and basically the high armor becomes tailored to each character individually as opposed to just a general thing. But from this point onwards, you want to keep an eye out for any characters that has C slot spheres. Now, if you were good people before when Paladin Cecil came out and you farmed the heck out of his refined spheres, this is why you were doing that. It's so that you can use those C sphere slots to take advantage of the additive multiplicative effects of Paladin Cecil's brave gains on top of the encouragement keystone, so that you're able to then just gain loads of bravery. And there are certain characters that I will mention later that are even more advantageous to this than others. Golbez himself is actually very good as well. Golbez, however, for me personally, is a mid-priority character. Others will consider him higher. The reason I've put him at mid is because he's sandwiched between 2 characters, for me, that I consider the highest priorities. He basically starts a trend where he gains more bravery than damage he deals. So for example, if you're hitting for 10,000 bravery, he'll actually gain 12,000 bravery for those hits, and he actually hits like a bus as well. And with his burst effect, he inflicts freeze on the enemies, so that can actually be really good as well. The problem with Golbez is that a lot of events, similar to how Lightning suffered with Thunder, Paladin Cecil suffered from Holy, there are a lot of events that start to absorb Dark very frequently, not long after Golbez goes away from Synergy, and then by the time he becomes free up to be used again, you've probably gained new toys that you'd rather use than him. Not to say that he's bad, he's actually very good, and he is on a summon banner, so I'll probably use tickets on him, and there is a caveat here that will make me want to pull for him a little bit more than I would have done originally, and it's Nine's Lost chapter, which I'll get to in a moment. Hope is also on this banner, but quite honestly, if you've managed to go this long without Hope, you probably don't really need him now. He's I consider him a low to mid priority because his call is still really good. I really like Hope. I've used him a lot since I've had him from the first time he came around, but I don't think he's an absolute necessity for everyone to go for. Golbez, I would like to at least try and ticket his LD. I think that it would be nice to have it, but because there have been so many banners on the last batch, so with Garland, I'm going going straight gems for Garland, burst tokens. I'll probably end up going gems for Faris as well. Yang will probably get some tickets from me. Ignis will be the only skip I have from that batch. Whereas with this one, I want to try and save up because the next batch after Golbez's is going to be really expensive for me. And it's also, with Divine Alexander, you can actually cheese it using Gladio if you find the right setups, and I'll obviously discuss that more as we approach that particular event. But Gladio can fight off Divine Alexander by himself, so you don't actually need to worry too much about that. Nine's Lost chapter features Nine and Fujin. Nine's LD boards are actually really good, making him a lot more offensive, making his defenses last that much longer as well, making him a significantly better... Well, I want to call him a tank, but when I've called him a tank before, people read me to Phil. But he puts shields up and he protects people, so he's a tank as far as I'm concerned. And he prevents damage, and he becomes a lot better at that. And the new character that comes along with him is Fujin. Fujin is fine, but she is very rapidly eclipsed by another character that comes out very shortly after her. However, there are 2 reasons that you may want to at least consider pulling for Fujin. I'd still consider her a low priority character, but the fact that Lion's Lost chapter requires dark or wind damage and any other elemental damage you get countered to death therefore making it so that a wind enchant character like Fujin becomes a lot more preferable to have access to if you want to tackle this particular fight. That and Fujin's call abilities are really useful on one character, but it is one character that is going to get used a lot, which is Bartz. Bartz is an incredible character when he gets his burst. Now you can see him sort of just hovering above there, and you are definitely going to want him. He does Wind Imperil and he enchants himself for wind, but he doesn't enchant the party for it. But you can circumvent that by having access to Fujin's calls, which do enchant the party. I'm not saying you should go out of your way for Fujin to get that, but it's a reason to have her. But the only reason that I would consider going back to either this banner or Golbez is because this event is an absolute cow without them. Catered to me is a high priority character, but that's because I love him. Like, I love him and I really want him. He's an androgynous crazy. Of course I'm going to love him. I do actually think that his kit is extremely unique as well and fun, and that I actually really value his call abilities as well. What his primary function is he's the first character that comes along with gilded debuffs, which means that they can't be removed by the enemy, they can't be dispelled, they can't be Azunid, anything. They are there, whether they like it or not. And Catered is the first character that brings that along. Now, I want to have Catered because of his call abilities. He has a stacking debuff called Obsession, which even from the first level, whenever the enemy gains bravery, he steals half of it. This is not a character that you need to pull for. Not really. I love him, and he'll probably get tickets from me, and if I happen to get Golbez's burst while pulling for Catered, though honestly I'm on the assumption based off of the last few months where I'm probably never going to pull a burst again, so burst tokens are going to be my way of getting them. If I haven't got Golbez LD already by then, I might want to go back and get his LD, because I think that any character that has the week worth of synergy, the triple event worth of synergy, is at least worth looking at because they can be used in future events as well. And Catered is a character with his call ability does inflict the Obsession debuff, which he doesn't steal the bravery because he isn't there to steal it, but having all of your opponent's brave gains cut in half, it's going to be useful for events where enemies like to gain bravery. Like if you think about boss rush with the snakes that gain bravery every turn, fights like that will be made easier by having access to that call ability. Now this next batch of banners is gonna be expensive. If you're saving for any batch of banners for the next couple of months, make it this one. This banner, or these banners combined with Garland, are why I don't want to pull for Golbez as much as I would really like to have him, and I have to hope that I'm going to get lucky on him. Because Bartz is absolutely backbreakingly powerful. Backbreakingly powerful. Like, he gets another rework, which gives him a special effect aura that imperils wind for the enemies. Note that that's an aura, not a debuff, so enemies that are immune to debuffs still get caught by it, which is really nasty. And he enchants himself for wind. He has like crazy amounts of stuff that are like auras and bravery recoveries. He keeps your party safe. His burst is massively powerful in that he gives like attack up. In fact, I actually need to bring up the list of all the different things that he does because I forget half of it half the time. But his burst effect provides party brave up, attack up, brave damage dealt by 30%, brave damage cap, HP damage up, party bravery recover based on damage dealt, so you get refund on everything as well. All of his stuff is massively powerful. His good luck charm that he gets from his LD makes his damage and elemental weakness damage go up. Now, elemental weakness damage up is actually quite a big deal going forward as well. It increases splash damage that he deals. He gets more skill uses out of everything. Bartz is an absolute wonder and is not one you want to miss out on. As far as support characters go, apart from healing, Bartz does literally everything. He has gravity in his kit as well. His LD sets the enemy bravery to 0 instantly, and then he hits them afterwards. Catered actually does that as well with his EX, but Bartz does it a lot more and does like battery, like gravity-based damage with his other attacks as well. He's just an absolute phenomenon. And therefore, I think that you would be absolutely remiss to not at least go for his LD here. He is another one that comes back pretty early on with Burst Plus, and right now, as of right now, Bartz is still considered the best character in the game in JP version, or certainly one of them. And therefore, you want to try and pick up his LD. I am aiming to pick up his Burst as well, and quite honestly, I hope I don't have to use Burst tokens on him because of the amount I'm pulling on his banners. Penello's also back here. Penello's nice. I would skip Penello if you don't have her already, because there are other characters on these banners that really need to take precedence. One of them being Galoof. Galoof is an absolute phenomenal tank, always has been. He's got the cover tank thing going, where he is an evade tank and he dodges and counterattacks. Well, with his LD and everything like that, he actually counterattacks twice, and he gets the similar sort of effect to Ardyn, where he literally can't die. So Galoof is definitely another one that I'll probably be using gems on. Like, I'm using gems on Bartz, I'm using gems on Galoof. Like, Galoof is in a similar kind of banner to what Serra and Aerith and Ignis are on, where it's one of those off-banner type things, and those banners have categorically not liked me very much up until this point, so hopefully Galoof changes that for me. I'd like to pull his LD without having to pity it for once, that would be nice. It's just another really strong character, so Bartz is highest priority, absolute 100%. If you pull for one character in this entire list, I would suggest it be Bartz, honestly, because of the amount of longevity this character has. Honestly, the number of events I have written here that have Bartz in them is staggering. And then Galoof is also a fantastic character to have. He's a high priority character, not as high priority as Bartz is, but I definitely think he's well worth having. Edward and Palom. Palom's actually really good, but he is a simple damage dealer. He does a lot of damage, and he's blocked to ice damage. He does very much a lot of the same things that he's always done. He's quite selfish in his damage, but he does a lot of it. Edward, Edward mechanically is actually really good. His stats just really undermine what he can do, and his auras just aren't... His LD balls don't add an awful lot to him. He's decent. He's usable. I wouldn't pull for him if you don't already have him. And in terms of like the event itself, I already have Edward, thankfully, so therefore I don't have to stress too much about his particular event. But ice damage is a big part of the fight itself because it's the Lufenia orb. But if you have Celeste, then you can just take her. I have Celeste, therefore I don't feel the need to take Palom. Tifa. The last banner that comes along with this is a boss rush banner. Tifa's a bit good. Like, I have heard so much about Tifa the past 6 months minimum, probably since the last time I made a Future Pulls video. Tifa she's just a damage dealer. But my god, does she churn out some damage. Like, her LD, her rework, everything she does hits like a truck, and I'm not even kidding. Like, her basic beat rush attack turns into a triple HP dump, like a mini Seraphic Star. Her LD attack itself makes Seraphic Star pale in comparison, which has up until now been probably the strongest LD attack in the game. And Tifa just ruins everything. She goes from 0 to hero so fast. And she's another one that comes back with Bartz's burst as well. So given that I and 99% of other people are probably going to be using gems on Tifa as well, this batch of banners is arguably the most expensive one that there is. Tifa is a character that you will use a lot. Like, you don't have to have her though. If you don't go for Tifa, you will still be able to clear content without her. Bartz is a character that I would definitely take over Tifa if you're low on resources, honestly, because he lasts so much longer. He lasts into Burst Plus era. Damage dealers are superseded more easily than others. Tifa actually isn't. Like, she's at the start of a power creep where she just goes off, and honestly, I have her being used up until Burst Plus era. Like, all the way up to Burst Plus era, like with Yuna's banners, things like that. Tifa is usable for that long. So, like I said, this is the most expensive batch of banners that I think there is. So, Bartz is getting gems from me, Galoof is getting gems from me, Tifa's getting gems from me, meaning that the only skip that I can afford to make here is going to be Edward's Lost Chapter. So this next batch of banners might be a bit controversial for some, because based on some of the banners on it for me. But it's not going to be based on Eald'narche's BT, I don't think. Eald'narche's BT is nice, like, you know, Eald'narche's LD, we already had the LD boards that make it significantly stronger, so we have him at a pretty decent stage already. And Eald'narche's burst is definitely going to increase his stats, but what Eald'narche's BT does is makes it so that any debuffs he deals don't tick down after enemy turns for the next 8 of his turns. And it's nice, like, don't get me wrong, like, having Warp and Terror not tick down is really good, and there are certain fights that he can definitely lock them out of. But you don't ultimately have to have it. And I would have personally gone for Eald'narche if I hadn't spent loads of resources trying to get his LD the first time it came around and then failing. So therefore, like, I might throw some tickets at this. I'd consider him like a mid-priority character. He is still going to kind of be a synergy character for his batch, so some might consider him higher, but I would personally, like, if I've got tickets to throw at him, then I'll throw some because I really like him and he's definitely a fun character to play. But he's one of the quickest burst characters to kind of fall behind in terms of power creep, so he's not going to last as long as your Garlands, your Bartzes, and characters that follow Eald'narche. Noel also comes out with this, and his LD gives him a buff that makes it so that whenever he breaks an enemy, he gets a pretty strong follow-up. And the primary reason that he's given this is to make it so that his Fear Siphon Bravery attack actually has more use, because you get a free turn after you use that. But it's a Bravery attack, so you don't really get to capitalize on it. So by having that, you get a much stronger attack base off of that than you would have done before, and he's still got a lot of rebreak in his kit, things like that. But with regards to Chaos Bahama, which is the event that comes with this, you can bring along a launch team to this. Like, you can bring Cloud Kais, Dark Knight Cecil, and it worked pretty well. If you've got Tifa, then you don't realistically need Noel, like, because he is just a damage dealer. He's got a bit of aura on him, but he's not going to do anywhere near as much as Tifa's going to do for you in the long run. Now, Strago's Lost Chapter has Ashe LD in it. Now, Ashe LD is a real hot topic for a lot of people. Ashe gets reworked. She gets significantly stronger as a support-based character with holy like accessibility, things like that. And her LD actually gives her an HP attack that instantly charges another character's EX, which, in the right hands, can be really powerful. I don't think there's any point where I absolutely have to have her. Like, when I've planned around like all these teams that I'm going to use, I can put Ashe into them, and therefore I'm definitely going to give tickets to her. And if I get her, then I'll be really happy about it. But given that the amount of resources I'm likely to have spent in that last batch, I'm going to want a period of time where I can start saving again. And this is probably the best chance for me to do that. Ashe is really good though, like she's really good. So while I am only going to be throwing tickets at her and she's like mid to high priority, other players may consider her to be a much higher priority than I do. Iroha will be the same. Iroha's main gimmick is that she is used for her Phoenix aura or Phoenix buff, which makes it so that when you deal HP damage, you don't use all of your bravery doing it. You actually keep 20% of it back. So it's a little bit different to refunding bravery because it gets around brave gain reduction auras. You just keep hold of it, and that is really good. And her call ability also has this. So, but again, when it comes to Iroha, I would like to have her. I would love to use tickets on her, maybe get her if I've got an abundance of them, but I am not going to go crazy trying to get hold of her. Similar with Strago as well. I should have mentioned with Strago because I actually already have Strago, but if you haven't got him already, again, because he came out after, like not long before LD boards came about, his LD boards are okay, but they literally just make him a bit stronger than they already were. It's not a huge deal. It's good, but if you don't have Strago already, I wouldn't go chasing him. I like having some of these early LD characters come back because it means that I have synergy when they come back around again, and it means I don't have to pull for them. And it's the same as what I've said with characters like Bartz and Garland, and not having to pull later to save yourself so that you can save yourself for different banners down the road. And Iroha and Ashe come back on banners that I am more likely to be pulling on as well. Certainly in the case of Iroha. Other people are probably more likely to pull on Ashe's next partner. I'm going to want who Iroha comes with the next time around. So with this batch of banners, I'm hoping to use this as a buffer for saving. Where possible, like if I've got a huge amount of tickets left over because I'm going so hard in on Tifa's batch and Golbez's batch might, God forbid, have been nice to me, then I'll come back and I'll probably throw some tickets at this. But I'm not going to go mad on it. Now, before we move on to Layle's batch, I did actually fail to mention that Eald'narche is around the time where the debuff slots get expanded to 8. So expect that that's the sort of time where you'll start to see more of calls like Faris, etc. Now, going into Layle, Layle's rework is actually pretty solid. Like, if you like launch-based characters, then you're gonna like Layle. It's as simple as that. I do really like launch-based characters, but similarly to Eald'narche, he does actually fall behind, not on the back of the fact that he's not strong, but on the back of the fact that other characters just kind of take over him. His LD makes it so that whenever you launch an enemy, it doesn't matter what the turn order is, you will get the full launch regardless. Like, even if the enemy's turn is immediately after Layle's, you'll still get both characters jump in. So I would quite like it for that reason. I think I can probably live without the burst, especially seeing as there is another banner coming out with Layle's batch that I know I'm going to be going all in on. So Layle for me is tickets. I already have access to Kais, but so therefore if I get him, sure, whatever. But if you get him along the way, then fantastic. This is the banner that comes with that really strange kind of 6-man event that's a bit weird. But as long as you've got launch-based characters like Cloud, like Kais, like Layle, or like Cecil, anything, they'll all work for this. So although I wonder if they're going to change this event, because I know it was met with a lot of contention from the player base when it came out. So I wonder if they're going to change it. The other banner that comes along with Layle is going to feature Cryo and Celeste LD, so they're going to be possible for you to pick up. I still really like Cryo. I certainly wouldn't I don't like pulling for older characters particularly. Some people don't mind it. I would always prefer to look forward and not look back at characters that I've missed, because I feel like I would rather get hold of them later, get hold of them at the time where I'm going to make the most use out of them. And with Celeste and Cryo, especially if you picked up Galoof, you're probably not going to use Celeste and Cryo as much going forward because new characters are just going to come out more. Then with Kurasame's event, Kurasame actually gets quite a nice LD board. Like, he gets Ice Enchant, he gets an LD call and a regular call that actually puts Ice Prison on the enemy, so it means you can take advantage of that HP damage plus from his call abilities. And Cypher comes along with his LD, which doesn't rework him as such, but it gives him a buff and a framed debuff to the enemy, which makes it so that he delays the enemies every time he attacks them as long as they have that debuff on. It's actually pretty strong. He's not high on my priority list, but there is an event later on with Quistis that comes about that a lot of contention was met from the JP player base because people felt that they had to pull for Quistis in order to get it. I've seen clears that use Cypher, I have seen clears that use Cloud of Darkness, who isn't far off from where we are now. I'm not probably going to be pulling for Cypher because I plan on using Cloud of Darkness a lot. So therefore, I'm not going to be pulling on this banner. Any banner that has 2 LDs on it, which you'll see is starting to become more regular from this point on, like Layle comes with Kais at this point, and so therefore you're going to see double LD banners a lot more frequently from here. But I think that going forward, as much as Cypher is quite cool and I think he's a very underrated character, if you've got resources for him, throw a few tickets at him, see where you go. I don't think he's an absolute must-have though. Now this next banner has reworks for Sephiroth, Warrior of Light, and LD boards for all 3 of them, and honestly, they're pretty fierce. Like, Sephiroth rework is really powerful. It turns him into a much, much stronger damage dealer, and it gives Warrior of Light some really nice extras onto his into his buffs that come with his LD. So, to give you a quick rundown on what those do, his LD board makes it so that Guardian Shield gives you HP damage up, means that you get Bravery regen, you get Brave damage reductions as well, Party Overflow, all that kind of stuff, and as long as he gets Last Stand, which he should have had from the first place. I don't know why he never had it to begin with. And his LD call actually puts shields up, which is kind of fun too. Sephiroth's Awakening, however, or rework, makes it so that he does double HP dumps on Octaslash. It makes it so that you gain Bravery between attacks on both of his attacks, which he should have always been doing but doesn't. He gets splash damage on Octaslash, which is huge, and I really appreciate that. And his LD board gives him a new buff that gives him a similar thing to what Golbez has, where he'll deal damage but he'll gain more Bravery than damage he deals, which is fantastic given that he has multiple HP dumps on a lot of his attacks. And he also also gives himself an HP damage upgrade. Scintilla has a much bigger like hit count. You get cellular degeneration or like cellular erosion, whatever it's called. The frame debuff you get from his LD turns into a gilded debuff, so it means that they take more damage and you get sap from it as well, and it's going to last that much longer. Paladin Cecil does also get his LD boards, but honestly, like Cecil's like already really loaded. Like if you're gonna if you this is similar to the start dash banner. If you already have one or two of the burst characters here or all of the LDs, don't pull here. But they are all very strong characters. Sephiroth is actually a character I plan on using a fair amount of, but I pulled for him the first time he came out, knowing full well I wasn't going to use him when he came out, and knowing that he was going to turn up more here. Let's also not forget that his burst effect is actually one of the strongest ones in the right situations. The setting bravery to 1 every turn with the right characters trivializes certain content. Porum is probably the highest priority LD only character there is outside of Tifa. Like, well, actually I'd say there was 4 of them. Tifa is probably the least prioritized one out of the 4 of them as well. Porum is absolutely incredible. Think Aerith on steroids. So Porum was already very good for her ability to mitigate HP damage, overflow HP, all of that, but she never dealt a lot of damage. Now, she puts up a buff on herself that gives party a max HP up, party HP regen, party-wide last stand, which is a huge thing, because the only other character that's had that has been Freya. Bravery increases while party HP is at 100%. And while this buff is active, she then gets a follow-up attack that reduces all bravery from enemies based on HP, then deals AoE split damage based on 100% of the total current HP of the party, and it doesn't consume her bravery. It's quite extraordinary. Like, she does an absolute major amount of stuff, and her EX becomes more useful. She is one that you will want to use gems on. You will use her a lot. You will skip other characters because you won't need them anymore because you have Porum. She is an absolutely incredible character. So, by and large, I think that Layle's batch will come down to, I'd like to have Layle. I can live without him, but I'd like to have his LD so that I have synergy throughout the whole sort of batch here. Transcendence 3 also comes along with Porum, and Layle's very useful at that. So if you've got Porum and Layle from this batch, then you're going to do well. If you happen to pick up Cypher or Sephiroth along the way, or even Warrior of Light, then great, there are going to be extra bonuses for you. But with this batch, your priority here is definitely Porum. So next on the list is going to be the third character that I think is worth going all in on at this point in time when it comes to your gems and your burst tokens, which is Cloud of Darkness. Now, Cloud of Darkness's LD makes it so that her darkness stacks. Again, I am presuming that players who are watching this video know what characters currently do, because I have to explain every character completely from scratch. This video is going to be even longer than it already is. But Cloud of Darkness' darkness stacks that allow her to use her really powerful skill 2 that delays by 3 turns and hits like a bus. It means you can go over the cap for that, so you can go over 5, and she gets loads of benefits by being at 5 stacks or more, and it means you can kind of save up darkness stacks and not end up having to build back up again after you use the LD. And her burst obviously gives her an extra use of that, and it also makes it so that she's able to just churn out damage. Like, she just does so much damage all at once. She's like magical Garland, basically. And then her burst on top of that makes it so that anytime any party member acts, she then does a follow-up attack, which is pretty nasty, and like that also increases her darkness stacks. And then when she breaks enemies, she also gets the free turn kind of deal, which, given that she has counter-attacks, if she breaks enemies with her counter-attacks, she gets one off of her LD as well, then she jumps turns, and that's really powerful in and of itself. And again, she's another character that gets Burst Plus pretty early on, so like just like Bartz and Garland before her, if you happen to get all of her stuff, then it means you don't have to get it later. And she's again a character that pops up a lot in a lot of my clears, a lot of other people's clears, way past her like synergies. She is very much a worthwhile investment. Gabranth, I'm not going to pull for Gabranth, mainly because I already have him, and even if I didn't, I probably wouldn't at this point, because there are a lot of cool abilities that are really worth using. While I think that Gabranth is really nice to have, and I probably will use him once or twice again, then it means that I have access to the Brave damage down, the HP damage down, the instant break. He's a nice character to have, but I would consider him a low priority character as opposed to Cloud of Darkness, which to me is of the highest priority. Sabin comes back with Gladio comes back but brings Sabin LD along. Sabin's actually really nice as well. Like, he gets delay in his kit, like 2-turn delays, which again is the kind of thing that you are wanting to see for things like Quistis' event. Cloud of Darkness could obviously cover this as well. Sabin I have seen used in this once or twice as well, but I think that the main draw for Sabin is that he has Enchant and Imperil for himself, he has delay in his kit, and he hits a lot harder than he used to. He's definitely a worthwhile character now, and he's a character that, like, I wouldn't mind throwing a few tickets at him, but I personally would consider him maybe like a mid-priority. Like, I wouldn't go too crazy for him. I mean, Inkwelder will kill me when I say it, because he loves Sabin. But he is good now. Like, if you want to make use of Sabin, you will be able to do so. Now, this one's going to be a bit of a hot take for a lot of people. I don't plan on going in for Queen. And a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, are very excited for Queen, and with good reason. Queen does do a lot of things. She has like Brave damage down, she has like HP healing. Basically her EX puts her into a berserk state where she can only use like a variant of her Brave or her HP attack, but then she gets really powerful, sets her HP to 1, can't die. Her LD buff makes it so that you've got like really strong auras as well as a last stand or like party aura, but because I already plan on having that from Porum, I don't. If I can skip Queen, then I would like to. Like, I think that if I have access to, say, Galoof, Cloud of Darkness, characters like that, I don't feel that, or Porum as well, I don't feel that I have to go for Queen. She got an exceptional LD call, though. She's got max HP healing on that, full 10 hit Brave HP, full HP damage. And then the call ability is 20% attack up, Brave overflow limit 20% up, HP damage dealt 10% up, and HP regen for 3 turns. It's a lot. Like, it's offensive and defensive, and she definitely is a cover-all character. She's just not one that I plan on going super heavy on, because I think I'll have other characters that can do the same, that can perform the same functions that she does, even if not done in the same way. But Cloud of Darkness, to me, is an absolute must-have. So now we come up to another very exciting batch of banners, and it's Tidus's. We're starting to come towards the end of the regular burst era, and Tidus doesn't disappoint. Tidus gets a rework which gives him a follow-up off of his framed winning spirit buff that he already has, which makes it so that he does a Brave HP attack after every hit. Quick hit gets an HP attack, finally, and it being a instant turn node, turn count ability, makes it so that Tidus does really well. His LD makes it so that every 3 attacks he does, his regular shot, or the attack that comes, the follow-up attack, changes into Ject Shot, which turns it into a significantly stronger version of himself that re-breaks enemies and does lots of horrible things. He has a burst, obviously, as well, although how they managed to get the LD and burst the wrong way around, I don't like. Why that ugly-ass thing is his burst weapon when his LD is much, much more attractive, I'll never know. It basically makes it so that shock triggers twice every time that you do anything. But because he's such a turn-heavy hog character, you have to pair him up with the right characters. He gets more debuffs on him. His call ability is basically a weaker version of Faris's, but if you're going to be using Tidus, he's going to be in your main party. He absolutely shreds damage like nothing you've ever seen. Like, he is honestly one of the best damage dealers we've seen up until this point, if not the best, and he does a crazy amount of damage. Although I don't personally feel he actually needs his burst to accomplish a lot of that, so in this case, I'm actually probably only going to be ticketing this banner because I plan to gem one of the other banners that features Tidus, and if I don't get his burst by the end of it, I'll live without it. It's really good, really good. If you want to use Tidus a lot, you totally can, but obviously we'd all like everything and we can't all pull on everything. Rosa is a banner that I personally plan on skipping. Rosa does get some really nice adjustments, particularly mechanically, because raising a character isn't quite as big a deal as it once was, so re-rise is a much better attack. And Prey now doesn't add to turn count, it basically makes it so that you get more health out of it and all of that. And her LD, it gives her a new buff that makes it so Brave damage goes up, HP damage goes up, the stacks increase depending on how many party buffs you've got. It's fairly generic as far as healing support characters go. Her main benefit is still re-raise. But honestly, I'm going to be skipping this banner. I already have Reno, which I plan to use for the Lufenia mission. I plan on having Porum by this point, and if you have Porum, you probably don't need Rosa. Rosa's still good in and of her own right, but I wouldn't go out of my way for Rosa at this point. Setzer, on the other hand, you're going to want Setzer. Setzer is literally broken. And I'm not saying Setzer's broken because he's good. I'm saying he's broken because he breaks the rules of the game. Setzer's LD is fixed dice. Fixed dice makes it so that your party, and himself for a bit longer, can hit bravery damage cap with rainbow crit numbers no matter what they're hitting with. It doesn't matter whether there's bravery damage reduction auras up. It doesn't matter if they've made it so that they can only take 1 damage. It doesn't matter if they like put bells and whistles on. You could still have a really high chance of breaking the, or like hitting the brave damage cap without even trying. And even if you don't, it's still an HP damage up attack buff on top of everything else. And Setz is a great character anyway. He still has access to his freeze. He still batteries. He still delays. He's just a be-all, like cover-all offensive support character that happens to have a couple of defensive tricks up his sleeve and literally gets around some of the most annoying mechanics and gimmicks that Lufenia has to offer. So this banner is going to be getting all of my gems. I really, really think that everyone should at least look at Setzer LD. And this is where I'm hoping to get Tidus Burst. Tidus is one that I would really like to get, but I'm not going to go out and like burst token it. Leon will be, like, Leon does a lot more of the same kind of thing that he's always done. It's very much like the put the dark on the enemy enchant. I have Dark Absorb, my party has Dark Absorb. If you're not doing elemental damage, I can restore all of our bravery without even trying. And his LD does make a big case for that. Jack, again, like I said before, if you don't have Jack by this point, Jack is still really good, but I don't feel that you have to have him by this point in time if you don't already have him. So therefore, this banner for me personally is like a skip / tickets. Leon's actually very useful for a lot of things, like he's going to be useful going forwards, but I feel that with the teams that I have planned out already, I don't feel that I have to go for him. So with the, because this has a boss rush with it as well, like I plan on using Tidus, I plan on using Setzer, I plan on using Tifa, Warrior of Light, Sephiroth, all the characters that I would have used like for the last couple of months, they're all fairly useful for Boss Rush 5 as well. Strago is a character I actually plan on using if I can as well, like on the last team, because he's just really good. Aerith is a character that if you already have her, you can like use her in a big amount of like events up until this point, and you can actually have another chance of getting Aerith over on Tidus's LD banner. So if you get her along the way, she's still useful. She's actually one of the most useful characters like that has already been. I obviously haven't spoken about her much because her banner's already been and gone, but if you already have her, she will do a lot of work for you. So now this next batch of banners is another one that's going to feature a lot of characters that I think a lot of people are going to want. One of which surprised me quite how long they last, way more than I thought they were going to, because it's a character that I don't particularly care for. But before we go into them, let's have a look at this banner here, which has Kefka, Arden and Varn in it. They all get their LD boards, which is kind of nice. Like, they get a bit of a rework, but the real main star of the show here is Varn. Varn gets reworked so that all of his attacks, his basic ones, his follow-ups, everything become multiple HP dumps, and his LD board is absolutely fantastic as well. He gets another use of it for a start, and he also basically applies the same buff he gets from his burst onto his LD buff Mist, which means that his bravery won't go under 20% of his max bravery, which, given the fact that he does like 4 HP hit damage hits every time he uses one of his skills, is going to add up a lot. He also gets HP damage added up. He also gets like his Earth and Eruption becomes a 6-hit brave HP attack. So we're talking that 20% is going to add up very, very quickly. He also grants the Mist to himself before Earth and Eruption goes off and not after, which means that he's going to be benefiting on it from the moment he uses it. And it means that his burst phase, the damage you can get off of Varn's burst phase is astronomical. Like, Tifa shaming style astronomical. So if you have Varn's Burst already, I actually used my tokens on Varn Burst instead of Emperor when I had the option, because I had to use Burst tokens because of overflowing from my mailbox. I get premium mod pass, we all know this, and therefore it caused a problem where I had to pick up a burst there and then. I picked Vayne because I knew that when this batch of banners comes around, I was going to want to have that burst. Now going into the next batch of banners, Yuna is a real dark horse and a half. Like, she is powerful when she gets her LD. She gets a rework, as well as Agrius, who we'll come to in a little while, where her, like, both of her skills, so Izuna and Chia, don't count towards turn count, which is fantastic. So you have Izuna on a stick, you have all access to all of that. Vayne is still around, he's still doing his thing, but he ends up, like, amping it up significantly when her LD comes, and her burst as well, comes into play. So Energy Nova is a Eald'narche for the party, does multiple Brave HP attacks, gives her Valor 4 in the same way her EX would, so that you're able to use the alternate EX more frequently, and you get a buff from her where party max Brave attack and Brave damage dealt goes up normally, but when the party doesn't have any debuffs on them, which they shouldn't do because you're playing as Yuna, it then goes up by another 40%. So you've got 60% extra bravery damage dealt and 20% extra HP damage dealt. And then while Valor 4 is active, his attacks end up becoming stronger and become double plus versions of themselves, so they hit multiple HP dumps as well. It's all just very, very strong. And then her burst ability as well makes it so that while the party has no debuffs, bravery and HP damage cap go up again. So while that burst effect is in place and her LD buff, your party damage just goes off like crazy. Like, so if you're using your Vaynes, your Tifa's, you will benefit from Yuna very, very heavily. She also has a recurrence of Trey's LD on her banner that comes with her own LD, so if you haven't had Trey already, he's actually still fairly useful by this point. I wouldn't go after this other banner here that has Desh and Gao on it. They've had their day in the sun at this point. You want to be going for Yuna. She's very, very powerful and used well into Burst Plus era as well. This banner here that has Shantoto, Terra and Noctis, meh. Honestly, like, I don't have Shantoto or Terra's BTs, and the LD boards are fine. Like, Terra, you know, Shantoto gets a bit of a rework from it, but ultimately she's still quite underwhelming comparatively to other characters that are around. And it's like, and that's not to say that she's bad. It's just that because Yuna is quite so good, and Agrius, which comes straight around the same time, is just as good. It is going to be another LD character that's going to demand your gems. You've got to skip something. And like I said, Agrius is part of the reason that I skipped Theodore the first time around, because I kind of like the idea of having a consolation prize that I don't mind having. I'm probably not going to use him, if I'm in all honesty, but Agrius is really quite exceptional. She gets a slight rework, as I said earlier, that makes it so that Judgment Blade deals 100% AoE damage when you have the plus version of it, but her LD gives her a lot of, like, even more of the party auras. So Knight's Pride also now heals as well, so she's got, like, healing, and she already had HP regen in her kit. She then gets a special buff that increases party brave damage again, party brave recovery up, which will counteract the buffs that come off of like brave reduction auras. And before I forget as well, the other big thing with Yuna as well, remember how I said how those sea sphere slots are going to come in really handy because of like Cecil spheres and stuff? Yuna has 2 of them. You will want to take both of those slots up with Paladin Cecil spheres. Trust me on this, you will thank me for it later. Anyways, going back to Agrius. Agrius gets this like really nice buff where she gets party brave damage up, like her own brave damage up goes up as well, but she also gets an HP attack that comes off of it, or a bravery attack actually, that comes off of it, that inflicts Flower Fall, which is confusion, and the enemy takes bravery and increased bravery and HP damage. So on top of the fact that she has the paralysis on Divine Ruination, the silence from her EX, and now confusion on her LD, she is just an absolute control menace. Like, she's just really good at it. Now these LD banners here, they are paid only, and from what I remember, very expensive, and you don't know which of these LDs you're going to get. I would avoid these like the plague unless they come in some new fashion. I would not touch these with a barge pole. Not to mention the fact that I already have Kuja and Onion Knight, and I don't know if I'm going to have Golbez by then or not, but even if I didn't, I wouldn't go anywhere near this. But then Yuffie LD comes around. I don't want to pull for Yuffie. I don't particularly love her, but like her LD, I think it's fine. Like it basically, her rework and her LD gives her a buff and a debuff that stacks depending on how many times they've taken damage, and her HP and bravery damage increases based on the number of debuffs the enemies have. And the Doom of the Living debuff like gets like it stacks and it gives her free skill uses. But I've never really loved Yuffie's like kit to begin with. Like it's good, but I mean I don't really want to pull for her. But she's very, very good for DE Transcendence 4. I'm hoping that I can skip Yuffie and Barrett, which are the last two banners on Yuna's batch, so that I can maybe use Setzer or Trey to cover the range damage portion of Dimensions and Transcendence 4, because one of the Lufenia rules requires range damage. So I'm hoping to not have to pull for Yuffie, but if I have to pull for either Yuffie or Barrett, I'd rather pull for Yuffie than Barrett. Barrett does get a lot better. He's better. I wouldn't say he's like amazing. He's still a very low priority character for me. Based on the fact that Agrius exists. Like, Agrius does all of what Barrett does in terms of increasing bravery damage, increasing attack, increasing max bravery, overflow, and has all these amazing kind of debuffs to go with it. Barrett has his EX Satellite Ray, and that's like follow-ups at this day and age when we're talking about characters like Yang and Cloud of Darkness and all of that stuff. It doesn't cut the mustard as far as I'm concerned. However, if you don't have Yang, this is a place for you to get it if you don't already have it by then. So that could be a reason for you. If you just picked up Tidus Burst in the last batch and you want someone to take advantage of it, you could pick up a Yang here, but I'm not planning on going in on this banner. I kind of hope I get Yang the first time around, but I'm also, by this point, not going to be mad about it if I don't have him. So now we've come up to the final batch of burst only banners before we start hitting burst plus, and the last one that's going to get it is going to be ExDeath. Now ExDeath comes with some very interesting banners with his own release. Now he comes with on his own banner with Kieran, and then the alternate banner, instead of having his LD on it, will have Lion and Ignis on it. Now this is where I'd like to pick up Ignis's LD, because I think that having it then, where it's his call is that much more relevant to other things, while still being able to pick up Lion at the same time. Like, Lion is not a character that you're ever going to absolutely must-have need. I've always really liked using Lion though, so I would perfectly happily settle for that. And ExDeath's burst and his rework and LD board and etc. actually make him into quite a menace. Like, his burst effect is another HP poison, but a big one, and it goes off after either an enemy or ally turn. So as long as you can stop ExDeath from getting turns, like, because it only lasts for 3 of his, you actually get a lot of HP damage passively just by him being there. He also gets like HP damage increases, like his debuffs end up stronger, lots and lots of different things that are on top of it. And if you don't have his LD already, he comes with Kieran. Kieran's actually got a lot going for him with his LD board as well. Like, it increases his hit counts and everything. His auras were already very good, but now his LD extends like the duration of his buffs a lot. He's now got expanded benefits to his LD effect, which are party damage up, bravery damage up for 30% for the party, 60% for him. He gets Soul Shot double plus, which is a multiple brave HP splash damage HP plus attack, which is actually very good. And given all of the buffs that he already has access to, Kieran actually becomes very, very playable after this point. Lion gets a follow-up attack after her LD, like Pirate Pummel, which allows her to use a new bravery attack that allows her to kind of switch party order. Like, she'll move after a selected ally, which, because she's using a bravery attack, she then gets the extra follow-up after it, so she's still doing HP damage. And if you're doing her EX, she gets 2 follow-ups from it. She's not stuck behind this mechanic where she has to target things that aren't targeting her anymore, because if she's got her LD buff up, she gets the hide versions of her skills automatically. Now, the reason I say that these 2 banners are interesting is because they're probably the only place where you're likely to pull for ExDeath Burst, and I kind of like ExDeath Burst. I'm not going to go out of my way for it because this is the last batch before BT+, but I think ExDeath Burst is actually extremely undervalued. I would class it as a mid sort of level priority, maybe high, but I don't think that he's an absolute must-have. Zell on Xander's Lost Chapter, I wouldn't go anywhere near. The problem with Zell, he's always been this meme character that's not particularly good, but after this point he becomes worse in a sense that he's like, yeah, he's quite good, but he's also extremely forgettable. His LD gives him like 4 turns in a row where he doesn't get any kind of turn delay or anything, and then his LD transforms into a different attack after he's done it. But he's still basically just a straight up damage dealer with not a lot else going for him. Xander is like, his call abilities give Dark Enchant. It's nice, but it's not anything special. If you've lived this long without a Xander, you're probably not going to need him then. I already have him, so I'm probably going to use him alongside something like Vayne and Setzer for his Lost Chapter. ExDeath if I happen to have his burst by then. If not, then no, but then not to worry. And then the last banner that comes with ExDeath is going to be VV's. Now, we already have VV because we got VV's LD board last year. But if you don't have it already, you could probably live without it. Like, if you know, his Lufenia requires fire damage, which means if you've got Xander or you already have VV, then you'll be able to take advantage of his LD boards, which means he does more damage, he gets HP damage percentages, things like that. But ultimately, this is a time where you should probably be saving ready for Burst Plus. So now we start entering the Burst Plus era. Now, I'm not going to go and cover everything that's been released up until this point in Burst Plus era because I want to do a little bit more research into some of the later banners as they've come out, because researching 60 plus banners all at once is very time consuming, and I don't want this video to last like too much more longer than it already is. And it means that we can just revisit this sort of near to the end of the year. But with Burst Plus, we are getting a new mechanic, which is the Burst Plus itself. So this will work similarly to how EX Plus did in the past, but obviously for bursts. So when you get books and ingots for burst, burst plus, etc., you know, things like that, it works in very much the same way. You use a book on a burst after it's been completely maxed out in order to burst plus it, and then you get an ingot back, and then you get ingots for finishing content, hard content, using ingots on other bursts, etc., things, or using books on other bursts, etc. And the first 2 characters that get theirs are going to be Y'shtola and Zidane. Now, Y'shtola, like, she has a banner of her own that features her burst. All of the other batches are Zidane. All the other batch of banners belong to Zidane. Now, Y'shtola is a very, very strange one for me personally, because I'm going to be skipping her with the intention of using burst tokens on her should, God forbid, I get any of the other bursts I'm looking for between now and Burst Plus. I want to have Y'shtola. She gets reworked so she does significantly more damage. Her LD makes it so that she charges Afflatus Misery way quicker. And her burst, and what Burst Plus actually gives you is a plethora of extra effects on the burst effect usually, an extra turn during the burst, and then at max ability, like at max 3 out of 3, the ability to use just the burst attack on its own once, so that you actually get 2 lots of the burst effect. So that's what you're going to be aiming for with some of these characters. And Y'shtola is a character that benefits from it quite a lot, because her damage capability increases exponentially. Zidane, on the other hand, is also very good. His LD makes it so that anytime he breaks a character, he deletes their next turn, which is obviously very, very powerful. And his burst makes it so that he has the ability to steal elixirs from the enemies and fully restore HP for the party whenever he basically feels like it. It's also very strong, but believe it or not, I'm actually only going to be ticketing this banner so that I can get Zidane's LD. And the reason for that is because there are 2 other banners on Zidane's batch that I'm going to be using gems on, and this is also another very expensive portion of time for me. Sync and Guy's Lost Chapter, poor old Guy, he gets pretty much nothing from his Lost Chapter, sadly. Sync's actually pretty good though. She's not a character I consider a high priority in any way. Like, I'm gonna skip her, but she is actually very good for Type 0 fans. Her damage goes up exponentially. She puts debuffs on the enemies that makes it so they take more damage. She obviously has launch in her kit, so she complements Zidane, and she complements Sid Reigns. We'll get to Sid Reigns in a second, and she is generally quite good. I'm not gonna go out of my way for her because there's so many other expensive banners here, but if you like her, she'll do you well. Aphmau is one of my favourite characters in this game to use, and has been since the very, very first time she came out as a 35 CP hero in the EX era. Her LD makes it so that not only does she have all this crazy stuff like debuff evasion, free turns, massive auras, massive longevity, now she can manipulate her turn order, like her friends' turn orders, and make it so that they're able to do more. So honestly, Aphmau is one of my favourite characters because she just does so many things at once. And looking at my list of events and planned teams that I have for events, the number of teams I have here that list Bartz, Sid, Aphmau is speaks for itself. Like Bartz, Aphmau, and then Sid Reigns just do a ton like by themselves. And then speaking of Sid Reigns is like Layle, but he makes Layle look like hot garbage. Like, Sid is a launch character supreme. The amount of damage you can churn out with this guy, and the fact that he has, like, Dispel, Azuna on his EX, he also is able to just make it so that he gets, like, a follow-up attack with multiple HP dumps at the end of any launch that he starts, which his LD buff makes it so he always starts a launch. In combination with the right characters, like I said, Aphmau manipulates Sid Reigns' turn so that you've got all the auras from Bartz, and then you're just doing insane amounts of damage. Or if you've got Zidane or Y'shtola, you can just make it so that he's doing even more. He is a character alongside the likes of Agrias, Porum, Tifa, that you're just going to want access to. And he is the reason that I skipped Mog this time around, because as much as I'm probably not going to use Mog, when I'm pulling for Sid Reigns, if I get Mog LD, as opposed to it being a dupe and me going, ugh, I can at least go, well, at least I've got that now. It's just one of those things. But from this batch, I'm going to be skipping Y'shtola, but I'm going to burst token her hopefully before then. Ticket Zidane's LD, hopefully. And I will notice as well, Beatrix actually gets quite a good rework here, and her LD boards are actually really fierce. It turns Rose Petals into not just a follow-up attack, but a trap as well, so that they're taking more damage from that, and you basically get a buttload of extra bits from the actual debuff itself. So you get access to, I have to try and remember now, I've got to read it. When the battle starts, you get Rose Petals off the top. You also get, it also turns into Thunder Element, and she Thunder Imperils on top of it as well. They take more Brave damage, their defense drops, and you get splash damage from Rose Petal as well. Like, if you're against multiple enemies, it adds up really quickly. So that's something that you might want to consider as well. I already have Beatrix, and I'm heavily biased towards her, but you never know. Now, we've got 2 more batches of banners that we're going to talk about today, because otherwise we're just going to end up with hours worth of content in one video. But Bartz's event here, like DE Transcendence 5, comes with Bartz Plus, so if you've already got Bartz, then you shouldn't have to worry about this. But it also comes with Ace Burst Plus, Ace Burst Plus, which is another really powerful one. He basically turns into a trap-based character, and one thing that's very noteworthy is that Ace works on multiple levels. Ace can be used with just his LD, he can be used with his burst, he can be used with his burst plus at 0 out of 3, or he can be used at maximum capacity. And I'm still seeing Ace used in current events in JP now from various content creators, so he's definitely a worthwhile investment for you. But realistically, Bartz, this is like the 2 that you want most. Bartz gets even stronger with his burst plus. His auras get stronger. You can use his burst effect twice, so you're able to get advantage out of the abilities from it twice. He gets an extra turn during his burst, like everyone does in a burst plus, and he takes advantage of all of those things, and it makes him into, once again, one of the best characters in the game. Now, with the rest of these banners, Prompto I'll be skipping, on the back of the fact that after his event, I don't think I've ever seen him be used in another clear since that point. I don't like Aranea gets Lost Chapter. If you've got Aranea, fantastic. I am completely skipping Prompto here. I have no interest in going for him, really. He's not bad. If you really like Prompto, I've never considered him particularly fantastic, and I've never wanted to use him, even after I did get his EX, alongside some other pull, I can't remember which one. But the LD, it does help him, and he benefits from a character like Setzer quite a lot, where, when you're using, the attack, Trigger Happy or anything like that, having bravery, hit and cap and things like that will be able to come back to him so that he's doing more damage. He's going to benefit from. Zac does more of what Zac does, and this is the banner that I will like. He locks everything to him. He takes less damage. He's a lock tank. He does a lot of more of what Zac does. And he also comes back with Ashe LD. So if I don't manage to get Ashe LD the first time around, then I'll be more inclined to pull here. If I do already have Ashe LD by this point, I'll be less inclined to pull here, because I plan to have other tanks by this point, like Galoof, like Warrior of Light with the burst. Zac's really good, and he's a big favourite for a lot of players, but this sort of period of time is where a lot of content creators were complaining that if you didn't pull for the character that was featured, you were going to have a really hard time with events. And I think that there is merit in that being said. However, we've had this kind of thing happen before. We've had it with Chaos, an early Chaos era where people were worried. In fact, it was probably worse then because there were it was like very narrow, and if you didn't pull characters there and then everyone else you had pulled for previously just weren't useful. And obviously I'll be covering these events in greater detail as and when they come up. But from what I've seen, that period of time doesn't last quite as long as the early Chaos era did. So while I think there is merit in people being upset that they feel that they have to pull for certain characters, not doing a Lufenia isn't the worst thing in the world. Like, if you don't really want to have to pull for a character, missing out on a few missing out on the resources towards Burst Plus, it's gonna suck. It is gonna suck. But do you value that, or do you value your resources more? It's a question you're just going to have to ask yourself as and when the time comes. Very similar to how it was when Chaos came out. And then lastly, with Ace's Batch, is probably the biggest offender for that particular type of thing, which is Quistis. Now, Quistis's thing is like the boss has to be delayed by a certain number of turns every time, and only Quistis and a select few other characters like Cloud of Darkness, Cypher, and Sabin can do that. And therefore, you really need to have a very select number of characters in order to do it. I have seen clears that do use that. And then I can try and use Cloud of Darkness. Or what I might even do is, because Cloud of Darkness Burst Plus is next on the list, I might wait until Cloud of Darkness Burst Plus comes out and then go back and try and do it. And maybe use Aphmau to manipulate turns so that Cloud of Darkness can have all the turns, and therefore the Lufenia orb ticks up nicely. But I haven't done quite enough research into that particular event singularly in order to be able to formulate a proper opinion. So that's all of Ace's events that are done. Like, I will probably pull on Quistis' event because I doubt I'll have Palom LD by that point, so that's 2 LDs I could do with. If I don't have Ashe, I'd be more willing to pull on Zack's banner there. I'm going to be skipping Prompto entirely, but I wouldn't mind pulling on Ace's banner singularly because it also comes with Kimahri's LD boards, which are actually pretty good as well. Like, they're nothing. Like, you're not going to use Kimahri in everything, but it definitely makes him a lot better than he was. And with Bartz, I hope to skip that banner entirely because I plan to have Bartz Burst and Faris LD by the time that comes round. And then the final batch of banners that I'm going to be talking about today, there are other banners after these, but again, we will cover those at a later date, is going to be Vayne and Cloud of Darkness's Burst Plus banners. Now, Cloud of Darkness Burst Plus, obviously I plan on having Cloud of Darkness Burst before this comes out, but Cloud of Darkness Burst Plus adds way more to her kit. So Darkness now gives her, as long as she has 5 or more stacks of it, 50% HP damage dealt up, and then her Burst Plus makes it so that you get more HP damage, and obviously all the benefits that come from having a Burst Plus in general. And her skill 1 actually gets a nice buff as well. Vayne is a funny one. A lot of people complain about Vayne because events come around with Vayne that people say, oh, he's not even good for his own Lufenia. That basically make it so that if you take too many turns in a row, the boss will just go, oh, sod this, and insta-kill you. This does not make Vayne a bad character. I am obviously slightly biased towards Vayne because he's one of my favourite characters in the game, but as long as you're careful with him, he's actually a very good team player. He already has buffs on him now that make it so that enemies' attack and defense are lowered, and that actually gets buffed to him like quite exponentially when it comes to his LD and his Burst Plus. Now, his LD and his rework makes it so that his plus versions of his skills don't tick down skill usage. So on top of his EX, that means that you're just going to have his skills forevermore, essentially. And obviously he has Rebreak in his kit quite a lot. You just have to be careful with him not to go crazy with taking loads and loads and loads of free turns and making sure the enemy can have one, and you can still get a lot of damage out of it. Now, his LD weapon makes it kind of plays into the damage / support role a bit more by giving him a buff that gives Brave regen to the party and himself, stronger for himself for all of these buffs, max Brave, attack up, and HP damage dealt, which is fantastic. And then, you know, while you have Contempt Plus, which is what he gets from having like 3 buffs of his Conqueror's, like his Conqueror's power, same as his EX, it extends the duration of Conqueror's power instead of giving it to him. So it means that you can have, like on the events where you can just go crazy with Vayne, more abilities to do so. And then his Burst Plus, or his Burst even, makes it so that every time an ally, including himself, breaks an enemy, Aranea, or any character that does that kind of thing. He does a follow-up attack that's actually pretty strong during the burst phase, and if you've got burst plus, then obviously he's going to benefit from that more than once, and he gets brave damage dealt up, attack up, brave cap, all of that good stuff, and he also gets a brave regen that stacks on top of his other ones. So while I think that Vayne may be skippable for a lot of players, a lot of people I've heard say Vayne is bad, and I do not agree with that in the slightest. He's not usable in every single Lufenia, and that I agree with. He is of highest priority to me, but he may be lower priority to other players. He also comes around with another one of these dodgy, like, pay for a random LD that you... I mean, all three of these LDs are actually very good. Tidus, Porum, and Galoof. Though Galoof, I think, is featured twice for some reason. But I still wouldn't touch this with a barge pole. And then Sith is almost like a reverse Setzer, in that every time you deal a crit, you battery the party. So the more crit rate you have amongst your party, the better. And like that's basically what Sith comes around. He gets a rework as well that brings him up to standard, and that's what that is. Shulk's actually a character I really want to like, and she comes around with Fujin LD again, and obviously Vayne Burst Plus, so I'd only really pull on it. I'd probably pull for Sith before I pulled for Shulk. Shulk is a damage dealer that gives shields to herself, and she has a very strange LD that reverts her state back to the start of the fight, like regenerates everything she has, makes so she has to put her LD, like her buffs all back up again and everything like that. But she just kind of goes, okay, like, I'm going back to the beginning, which, it's cool, but again, like a lot of the banners I've mentioned in, like, recently, there's not been any time where I've seen Shulk really used outside of her own mission. Like, so I don't think that she's a must pull. Fujin LD is still the same here. The only reason you're going to want her is to have the call ability available for Bartz, so you're not going to go out of your way for that. So, by and large, for a lot of players, Vayne's batch is probably more skippable than most. I just really, really love Vayne, so I will do what I can for one of my favourites. Whew, right, okay, so I'm going to just go through as a last minute thing and tell you all exactly what my plans are for each banner, and you can tell me whether you agree with them, disagree with them, and what have you, and I'll hopefully try to bear in mind that I've just covered about 60 to 70 banners all at once. If I make mistakes or anything like that, I encourage you, instead of just going, oh my god, Joe, I can't believe you wouldn't pull on that, tell me why you think this character is more worth pulling than I've passively said so, or if I've like perhaps overhyped a character and then you can turn around and go, oh no, maybe your resources would be better used elsewhere. That would be helpful information to not only me but to other people watching it, so do try to bear that in mind. But that being said, if I was going to pick one character from each of these batches, I'll try and list it as it is. With Garland's batch, it would be Garland himself. Garland's burst is useful now and with his burst plus. I really want Faris, so like depending on how Garland goes, I will want Faris as well, so she might get gems, she might get tickets. Yang is going to get tickets from me. Ignis is going to be a skip for now, hoping to get him later. Golbez's event. Golbez is probably going to be a skip / tickets for me, depending on how Nine's Lost chapter goes, because I know I'm not going to need him for Alexander, because I can use Gladio to cheese it, and even if I don't have Gladio, then I can use other teams to beat it. And Hope I wouldn't pull for now. Fujin, Fujin and Nine, I would only pull for Fujin if you know you're going to use Bartz a lot, and you don't feel that, and you feel that you need it. I don't think that Bartz really needs Fujin LD call. He can get away with a lot of other calls, but having that wind enchant on top of having the Wind Imperil aura, and I cannot state enough how powerful that Wind Imperil aura is, then you might want to go for Fujin, but she's probably a skip. Kadaj I'll be using tickets on, and if I get Golbez's burst, then I'll go back for the LD so I can complete his kit. Bartz, absolute 100% pull. This is probably the most expensive batch out of all of them, but Bartz, Galoof, Tifa, all worth your gems, all three of them. If I were to pick one out of the three of them, I'd actually say Bartz. Like some people would say Tifa, but Bartz is so useful, both now and in the future, that I just can't recommend anyone over him. Tifa, however, will carry you as a damage dealer for a very long time, and Palam's actually very good as well. I'm just skipping him because I have to skip somebody. Eald'narche's banners are probably the most skippable ones out of all of them. Like, Eald'narche isn't bad, but I wouldn't go out of my way for him. If I were to pick one character from this batch, I would pick Ashe. Although, with both Ashe and Iroha, in fact, for other players, I'd pick Iroha. Purely because I plan on picking up Iroha when Vayne BT Plus comes around, so that I have access to her call and everything. If I have tickets in abundance, I'll pull for Ashe and Iroha. but I'm not going to go crazy for either of them. Ashe is probably the best pick here because of the EX recharge and the support roles that she plays. I just feel that, like, with a lot of events that I've come up with, that I don't feel I have to have her, but she's really, really good. Layle's Batch is another one that's mostly well, it's not skippable. There's actually some very strong characters here, but we're coming off of a very, very heavy, like, batch of banners. Layle himself will get tickets for me just for the LD, because I think they're having that like uninterrupted launch is really nice for his batch, and he's going to be useful for DE Transcendence 3. Cypher, I originally said skip for Cypher, like, no questions asked. I already have Kurosame. Kurosame is nice to have for the call and everything, but I wouldn't go crazy for it. Cypher, however, I think after speaking to a few people, I may have come round to him a little more, so I might throw some tickets at him at the time. That's an I'll see how I feel kind of job. I'm not pulling on Sephiroth, Wall, and Cecil because I'm not pulling for Cecil's BT. If you have none of these banners and all of these kind of rework, like rejig banners, you're going to want to go in for them if you have nothing on the banner. The more you have on this banner, the less you're going to want to pull on it. It's exactly the same as a Start Dash banner. Porum, gems, 100%. Absolutely fantastic character. Like, no questions asked. Cloud of Darkness, gems, easy, 100%, not a problem. Sabin, I will probably skip, but I think that other people won't, because I do think he actually improves quite a lot, and if I've got tickets in abundance, I'll throw some at him. If you don't have Gladio or Sabin, this is a much better banner for you. Queen, I'll probably skip her, because I don't want to have to go after a brand new character in their full kit. But if I were to get her LD, I'd be pretty happy about it. I think that she does provide a lot. Her call does a lot of work. She does have a lot of... She's one of those, like, jack-of-all-trades characters, but she does hit pretty damn hard as well. Tidus, I'm going to be ticketing his LD and hoping to get his burst on one of the other on Sepsa's banner. If you haven't got Arciela is still useful, but you're not probably going to be pulling on this banner, because if you're pulling on Arciela and 7, you're not pulling on Tidus. And those banners are usually kind of trap heavy, because you're not because they have Tidus on them, but that's only got the burst on it. It doesn't have the LD on there. You want to be pulling on this one, the one that features his LD, not necessarily the ones that don't. And you only go for those if you already have the LD. Rosa will be a skip, purely on the back of the fact that I plan to have Porum and I won't need her. Setsa, gems, straight up. Waka, great consolation prize because he's got a really good call ability. I've covered Waka previously, and this will be where I hope to get Tidus's BT. If not, if I don't get Tidus's BT here, I'll probably throw some tickets at Leon because I do really like him. I already have Jack, and if you don't have Jack, this is definitely a ticket-worthy banner because there's 2 LDs there, both of which are very strong. Here, Vayne is the only thing you care about here. Like, Kefka and Arden are nice. They're both nice to have. Like, I wouldn't mind picking up Arden's burst here just because I know he's getting a burst plus, and therefore it makes him have longevity. But the only one you really care about here is Vayne, because he will last for a while, like well into BT plus era. Yuna will get gems from me, most likely, which is not one I expected to, because I'm not honestly the biggest fan of Yuna. Luckily, she has her wedding dress costume come out here, so I can tolerate her a little bit better. But she will get gems from me on this banner for her LD, and I will hope to get her burst either here or on Agrius's banner, because Agrius is also very good with the disruption. I wouldn't pick this banner here for Shantotto, Noctis, and Terra unless you're a big fan of Shantotto, because you generally just don't need her at that point. As I said earlier, any of these banners that are like paid, because from what I know they're quite expensive, and you get a guaranteed LD, but they're often quite old by this point. Oh, and I was wrong, it's Golbez, not Galoof the first time round. I wouldn't touch these with the barge pole unless something gets done to them. Yuffie and Barrett, I'm probably not going to pull on these unless I don't have Yuna's BT by this point, and if I do, it will only be tickets. ExDeath's entire batch will be like tickets on ExDeath's first 2 banners, hoping to get Ignis and maybe Kieran, and I would like to get ExDeath's burst on here, but, well, I would like Lion as well, but they're all very good and they're all very nice, but you don't have to have any of them. Ignis is probably the biggest chase there, purely because his LD call becomes so useful over the course of time. Zell, nice to have, ultimately not really needed. And then Vivi, 90% of people already have him. Those that don't, if you have Ignis by this point, you're not going to need him. Then we go into Burst Plus era, where I'm going to be using Burst tokens to get Y'shtola to prior to this, but if you don't have her LD, then you might want to go for her, you might want to go for Zidane. That's going to be a really hard choice for you because you probably won't have enough resources to go for both of them. But if you can get her LD easily and then move on to Zidane, then fantastic. I personally will be skipping Y'shtola, hopefully using burst tokens on her at some point before then, ticketing the LD on Zidane, and skipping Sync and Guy in order to be able to use gems on both Aphmau and Sid Reigns, hoping to get Zidane's burst from them. Now I won't have to. No, I won't have to go in for Bartz, because if I were to pick 3 characters that I will use burst tokens on between now and Burst Plus era, it would be Garland, Bartz, and Cloud of Darkness. Those are the 3 that I will have by the time Burst Plus era comes around. So I won't have to pull for Bartz, but I will want to pull for Ace. Depending on what my resources look like at this point, because Christ knows what they're going to look like by the time Ace comes around. This will either be a gem or a ticket banner, depending on how I'm feeling at the time. It will also depend on whether I already have Ash by that point, on whether I pull on that banner, or whether I pull on Quistis's, and whether I decide on whether I'm going to go in on that one. I'm going to skip Prompto because I just don't ever see him get used, and I'm not a big fan of his. I already have Aranea, so I'll already be able to cover the Lufenia fine. Cloud of Darkness's batch. Cloud of Darkness I aim to already have by this point, so I won't need to skip, I won't need to pull for her. Strago is also on her banner, so I won't need him either. However, I will be gemming Vayne's Burst Plus, but that is based on the fact that Vayne is one of my favourite characters, if not alongside Kuja for my favourite character in this game, and I would hope to get Iroha LD at the same time, and if I don't, so be it. Again, skip this. Kate Sith will get tickets if I don't get Vayne's Burst before I get his LD, and the same applies to Shulk, and that's only back on the basis of the fact that I'll want Vayne's Burst. If I don't get it, I'll just have to leave it. And then, as I said with these other banners, these are the ones where I'm not quite so confident in giving my opinion because I've not done enough research that far in advance. However, I will have Garland's Burst, but then I plan on gemming Lan and Rain, and then the rest is just going to be up to how resources go. Whew. And that's us covered for most, if not all, of 2021. So that's going to be all from this video. I know it's a long one. Thank you very much for sticking with me throughout all of this video. There's loads still to come. We've got plenty of life still left in Dissidia, Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. There's loads of banners that are coming out all the time as we speak. Over in JP, we're gonna get loads of surprises over in global version, I'm sure, between now and then that we're not privy to. So obviously do take some of these with a pinch of salt. Let me know in the comments below whether this has been helpful to you, whether you think I'm absolutely out of my mind for skipping Ash or Queen or anything like that, or not going all in on some characters that you might think otherwise. I just think that characters like Yuna, I'm actually really shocked by how much I actually really want her, and I'm willing to. I would rather be pleasantly surprised by something than disappointed. So hopefully there'll be hopefully my luck will change for a start by the time we get through these banners, and I'll actually be able to pick up some of these bursts. And let me know what your top 3 priorities are in this game. For me, for bursts, it's Garland, Bartz and Cloud of Darkness, and then Yuna as a 4th, and then for LDs it's Porum, Setsa and Agrius, and then Tifa as the 4th, because while Tifa is an exceptional damage dealer, she is a damage dealer, and those are the ones that get superseded the quickest. But to be fair, I am going to have Tifa, I'm not even going to lie. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making, whether it's about Dissidia or anything else. If you would like to join up on Patreon, obviously there's a link in the description box below for you for that, and you can get featured in the credits, featured in Would You Pull, and you can make your opinions ready for that if you want to, using this video and all sorts of other things. I now am going to go and lie down because there's a lot of video here, there's a lot of filming, and I hope that this has been helpful to you. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.